Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/itslayspodcast and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/itslayspodcast.
We're going to expand our weekly video segment to take you into the back shelves of your local video store. Back where it says horror videos and where kids are devouring some awful films that we call the video nasties.
Are you freebasing? Inquiring minds want to know.
I have to break free from this culture of mechanical reproductions and the thick incrustations dying on the surface.
Fuck the prime time, bitch!
Long live the new Fletch.
The pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite. As for our deaths, come with me and be immortal.
We have such sights to show you.
We've got to return some videotapes.
Hello, horror hounds! Welcome to the It Slays podcast. This is your humble host, Xylia.
It's Clue Gallagher's Glasses Rowan.
It's Coach Schneider's rank sweaty Adidas t-shirt Mike.
And we're back with another episode this week. Rowan, I'll let you introduce the pick since it's yours.
Yes, so this is, we should mention it's our grand finale of Pride Month.
Woo! You would steal the grand finale.
I have to do it extravagant. There is no question to answer because we have a lot to cover. I know we have a lot to talk about with this pick. Before I announce it, let's say, this is a monumental pick for us. You know, we shouted out what we were going to review in our Heavenly Creatures one. Tonight, we are talking about the possibly gayest horror film of all time. Iconic queer horror film.
Masterpiece.
And also the first time we've reviewed a second film in a series.
That's not true. We did Witchboard 2.
But we didn't do
Witchboard 1.
That's right.
But we did do the second
But I'm
movie
saying
in
it's the first time in order we've done the
Yeah,
review.
we've already done part 1 and now we're doing part 2.
Yeah, stop ruining our fun, Xylia.
Oh, okay.
Jeez.
Sorry, that's what I'm here for.
And the pick for this evening is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge.
Now, Rowan, you also picked a second movie to review.
Because I'm a cheater like Xylia. So we will later on in this episode be talking about the highly anticipated documentary that got released like last week, the week before last of recording this, and that is called Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. Mark Patton put it out, and it's just about his experience. We're going to talk about it once we talk about this amazing, iconic film. I don't even want to let these two talk. I don't care how they're doing. I need to get into talking about this.
Girl, this is your movie. This is your episode. Just
That's right.
Take the reins and run.
If you don't think today's episode's about me, well, it is.
It's not Freddy's revenge, it's Rowan's revenge.
That's right. A direct quote taken from My Super Sweet 16. So let's just get into the trailer and the bio.
Someone is coming back to Elm Street. He is not friendly. He is not patient.
Kill for me!
And he is not a welcome visitor.
No!
But he has something terribly special for the new kid on the block.
It started to happen again. Dad! I'm in trouble. You've had some scary dreams, okay? Help!
Daddy can't help you now.
There's something inside him.
Fight him! You're not afraid of him. He doesn't even exist.
Freddy Krueger is back on Elm Street.
Get out of here, Lisa! Jesse, fight him!
Watch out for him. He'll be in your neighborhood soon. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 2.
You are all my children now.
Freddy's Revenge.
Hey, Ro, since this is your pick, why don't you read out the bio?
Okay, so the IMDb bio is: a teenage boy is haunted in his dreams by deceased child murderer Freddy Krueger, who's out to possess him in order to continue his reign of terror in the real world and tap that ass. It doesn't say
into
that.
a drawer where he dances.
Shout out to that song.
Oh, we will insert that song.
We've been listening to it in my car. I don't have a radio in my car because it's broken, so I just listen to my cell phone.
The most sad story ever told.
I'm getting a new...
I know to you that was sad, but to most people that hear this, it's probably like, that's what I do anyway. I have Bluetooth. I just hook my phone up and listen to.
No. We're missing the point on this.
I just listen to my phone.
Oh, okay. So you just have it laid on your dashboard.
Spotify.
Okay.
Yeah, in my cup holder.
I was gonna say my friend used to have a travel cup in his car and would put his phone in the travel cup so that it would echo. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I know, right?
We did order radio in for me.
So let's talk about our first time experiences with this film. Mike, why don't we start with you?
Okay, well, as we may remember from the last time we talked about Nightmare on Elm Street, I started watching them from video stores when I was very, very hideously, disgustingly young. And my parents at that point just didn't give a shit what I was doing as long as I was out of their hair because I was this fucking super extra child. Shocker.
I never could have guessed.
No, I was an extra as an adult. I was super extra as a child. Anyway, so I would just watch these fucking movies, and I don't know what age I was. I was probably in early double digits when I first watched it. And did I understand it? Hell no. Did I love it? Fuck to the yes. And it was just instantly, I never understood why, as I grew up, and read more about it, that everybody seemed to hate this movie, and I was like, this is really cool. Like, this was, like, I get that it was not, the same as the other ones, because it didn't have the, continuing characters and stuff, but I was like, why does everybody hate this? And stupid, fucking, naive, young me did not understand that everybody hated this, because it was clearly a queer horror film. Anyway, on to you, Ro.
Yeah, like you, Mike, I can't even really remember the first time I saw this, but I would have been very, very young. Like, I remember watching all these, renting them from video stores. I never have, a clear memory of not liking this one compared to the others. I do remember, understanding that a lot of people didn't like this one. I just knew it was kind of the least favorite of the series. And then as I got older and understood it more, for all the reasons that I'm sure we're going to get into and talk about, I love it, and this is my favorite entry of the series. So, yeah, that was my first time experiences. How about you, Xylia?
Well, when Rowan and I were growing up, we would, go to his house, and he had a DVD player and TV in his room, which doesn't seem that spectacular, but this was almost 20 years ago, so it was pretty sweet. And we used to watch. Okay, so Rowan likes movies. I don't know if that's clear or not,
Rowan likes movies. Shocker.
So we used to just sleep and watch movies. That's all we did, pretty much.
It's true.
And so he made me watch every single Nightmare on Elm Street movie in a row.
This is also
It
true.
might have been over a couple days, but I can't remember. Anyways, that's where I saw this movie. I remember seeing this one and Dream Warriors. Those were really the only two I really remember, but this one I remember being my favorite, and really only because Freddy drives a bus off a cliff. That's the only thing I remembered from this movie.
It was the only thing you could relate to. A school bus.
A school bus. Pretty much. I mean, I did take a bus to school.
You're rich people with pools? No, girl. But school bus? Yeah. Snap.
My parents weren't rich, but they have a pool.
Okay, first of all, fuck you and your goddamn pool privilege, bitch, okay?
I mean, I only lived at the house for a couple years. Anyways, I digress. Yeah, so that was my experience. I had no awareness. Honestly, I don't even remember anything about this movie, like I said, besides the bus driving off the cliff. And I had no awareness that it was considered like a queer horror movie, and I had no awareness that people didn't like this movie. I just remember seeing it.
Before we get into it, we have to get into Xylia's favorite part of the program.
So we cut out the question, but we kept this part.
Where we gotta talk about who's in it. We also didn't mention this came out in 1985, just 2 years shy of the best year ever.
He actually means 4 years shy.
It's alright. So, the film is directed by Jack Shoulder. I wouldn't necessarily say like an iconic director. He's only really done a couple things in the horror scene in terms of directing. He did direct Alone in the Dark.
I was going to say, Alone in the Dark is really an underrated classic slasher.
Yeah. He also did The Hidden and Wishmaster 2. And that's pretty much his only notables. I know he edited a lot of movies before and after he became a director. He was more well known for editing movies. But I was lazy and I didn't look up what he edited because I didn't really care that much.
I mean, who cares about what somebody edited?
Exactly. Let's get into, the keynote actors in this film. So we will start with the one, the only Marshall Bell. He plays Coach Snyder.
Oh, we stan Coach Snyder.
Oh, yes, we do. That leather vest is everything.
Yep. Everything.
Also, in some very big filmography of movies, I'm like, holy shit, yeah, he was in that. So a couple things I'd written down. He was in Stand By Me. He was in Twins. He was in Total Recall, which I think is what I remember him most from.
Also, fucking, weirdly in 2020, a, forgotten classic.
Yeah.
Total Recall is so fucking good.
I love Total Recall. I never saw the remake. I'm sure it was terrible. He was also in Dick Tracy, Starship Troopers, and Capote. So, yeah,
we got really some, Oscar contenders in there.
Yeah, exactly. Next up, we have Robert Russler. He plays, Grady in this, Mr. Ron Grady. I didn't even know his first name was Ron. Do they call him Ron in this movie?
They do. When they sit down at the table with him in the cafeteria, Carrie, which is Lisa's friend, says to him, hey, Ron, or something like that. It sounds kind of like Ryan. Maybe she said Ryan. But...
Is he the friend with the black hair?
Yes.
Okay.
He's the boyfriend. How dare you? How dare you? Grady. It's Grady. Ron Grady.
Couple notables he was in, probably most notable Weird
by the
Science.
Way, I was gonna say 3. He's been in 3 of my favorite movies ever.
Well, let's see. I only wrote down a couple. I had Weird Science, Vamp,
and this. Weird Science, Vamp, and Freddy's Revenge. 3 of the best movies ever made. Boom, period, done.
I also had down, he was in Sometimes They Come Back as well. Another horror appearance.
Okay, well, yes. Minor Stephen King adaptation. We love it.
And next, we have the lovely Kim Myers.
Oh, Kim Myers, love her. Love
who plays
Myers.
Lisa. Also, kind of let down when I looked at the filmography. Not really anything, crazy notable. The only thing that stuck out at me is she was in Hellraiser Bloodline. So you go, girl. Working those bad, sequels to Hellraiser.
Does anybody else think she kind of looks like a young Meryl Streep?
Oh, 100%. She is like a brunette Meryl Streep, if there ever was one. And frankly,
yeah, she really does.
She's underrated. I think she is quite a good actress in this movie.
Oh, yeah, I think she's fantastic in this.
I think she's like Meryl Streep with sick fucking bangs. She is Bangs Streep.
Not everybody can pull up
Kim Myers, you are Bangs Streep. That is what we're calling you.
Next up, I had written the always iconic Clu Gallagher. I mean, his filmography is massive. Some notables I wrote down was The Initiation. Obviously, I think probably one of his most iconic roles was The Return of the Living Dead. He was in Feast 1, 2, and 3, which are like some personal favorites of mine. He was in Piranha 3DD, or I guess 3 Double D.
3 Double D, oh my god, come on.
And also, just kind of, to let you know he means business, also in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Shout out to, making it in the Tarantino film. And the last two, we'll go with Robert Englund first. I mean, does he need an introduction? An iconic horror actor. He plays Freddy, so he's in all the Nightmare on Elm Streets, 976 Evil, Chud 2, Wishmaster, Strangeland, Idle Hands, or if you like your 80s television, The Star of V, which is a great TV show.
V is so underrated.
Yeah, amazing. Which he actually, did right before he took the role of Freddy.
Hashtag get V on Netflix challenge.
Oh, that would be amazing. I would definitely watch that. Last but not least, the iconic scream queen that this movie produced, Mr. Mark Patton, who plays Jesse Walsh. And all I have down for his filmography is This Is All You Need, is Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Truly, I will say, this one film, he goes through more hairstyles in this one 90-minute film than Meryl Streep went through in the first 5 years of her fucking career. That's all I'm saying. Meryl Streep, step it up to Mark Patton's level challenge.
The challenge has been set.
I'm throwing down the fucking gauntlet, bitch. Go back in your filmography and show me how many fucking hairstyles you had by the time Mark Patton came out in this movie.
You better respond. Jeez.
Oh, I am waiting. The gauntlet has been thrown down. Meryl, this is Mike. I'm here. I'm waiting for your response. My DMs are open. My mailbox is open. I'm here. I'm waiting for you. I love you. Respond to me.
But don't respond unless you got hairstyles lined up.
Oh, listen. If bitch just responds, no. Listen, she needs to argue with me. I want a debate. I need discourse. I need discussion. I need argument.
Alright, let's get into this. We know what's coming up first. Our favorite scene. Xylia, let's start with you.
I mean, needless to say, the scene where Jesse is dancing to the song Touch Me.
How do you like that, Dad?
I need you so bad, baby. This is where you belong. Don't make me wait too long. All night long.
I'll leave the two of you alone. Excuse me.
Ugh, iconic.
Obviously the best scene. I also have written down here when the eyeball is looking through Jesse's mouth. Now, I can't quite remember what that scene was, so I don't really know if it was my favorite,
No, it's the scene when he's in Gray's bedroom.
Yeah, I seem to think at the time that it was one of my favorites, so I'll mention that too.
But you're totally on the right track with the Touch Me dance scene.
Yeah. That's, obviously the best part of the movie.
I was gonna say,
besides the bus going off a cliff.
I feel like we can all agree that is a favorite iconic scene from everybody.
Can we talk about that song first, though? It's an iconic song. And I just want to shout out one of my favorite musicians who is still very active and putting out brilliant music today. And it's Bright Light, Bright Light. He did an EP called cinematography, and it was songs from his childhood that were featured in movies, and he covered them. And "Touch Me" is one of them.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a
cool.
really cool. He's like a kind of electronic pop producer, and he's really like versatile and like super talented. And his Twitter, by the way, like follow him on Twitter. He's really funny. He Twitch streams, DJ sets from his living room right now, where we're mostly like kind of on lockdown and kind of stuck at home. But yeah, he did a really cool version of "Touch Me" based on the fact that it was in this movie. And it's a really, really, really good version of this song.
This is where you belong. Don't make me wait too long. This is where you belong. Don't make me wait too long.
So if you liked Jesse's dance scene, I highly recommend checking out Bright Light's cover of "Touch Me" because it's superb. It's really good. It's on like Apple Music and Spotify, so go check it out. And follow Bright Light X2 on Twitter.
I'm looking the person up right now.
So while Xylia looks the person up right now, Mike, why don't you hit us with your favorite scene?
Oh my god. Okay, so first of all, X's favorite scene is also one of mine. But this is a movie that, like, the narrative as a whole, if I'm being brutally honest, obviously we realize this, it's just kind of nonsense. It's patched together nonsense. So it's really set pieces. And the set pieces are all actually very strong. So that is one set piece that I quite liked. But I will not choose that. I am going to choose I think the emotional apex of the movie, and that is Jesse's defection from the party when his fucking heterosexual dalliance goes limp, shall we say, and he fucking takes off from the cabana and goes to visit his boy Grady in his bedroom and gets Grady killed.
Okay, of the questions... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's the emotional height of the movie. Like, to me... Even before I understood, when I was watching it when I was like a tween, I didn't understand the subtext, but that was the most emotionally disturbing scene to me, right? Like,
why didn't Grady go to the party?
Grady was grounded, girl. He said he pushed his grandmother down the stairs, and you know it was more like, I don't know, they walked in, I'm jerking off or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Something
I missed that part.
But he did say that the reason he wasn't going, there was, trust me, they did set it up. He did say specifically in the cafeteria that he wasn't going to the party because he was grounded.
Okay. I missed
obviously,
that part.
which gives Jesse an excuse to run away from the party and go hang out with his boyfriend.
Yeah, that's such a good...
Who, by the
this
way,
is the problem.
is wearing iconic 80s camouflage gym shorts. The likes of which, by the way, FYI, were copied by Lady Gaga in her recent merchandising campaign for the brilliant single Sour Candy with My Girls, Blackpink, and you could buy Sour Candy 80s gym shorts that are literally exactly what Grady's wearing in Nightmare On Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge.
Nice. You guys are just picking, all the good scenes, because obviously Jesse dancing... amazing. The whole Grady scene, especially once we got older and, understood the subtext or,
Yes. Okay. And can we throw this out here? I have to say this right now because before we get into any discussion of the documentary, when Robert Rusler says, like, obviously I understood the whole subtext of this movie, you can tell. I think the reason why that scene is so emotionally powerful, even if you're like a youngster watching it and don't kind of understand what's going on, is because it's very, very, very obvious when you rewatch the movie after you know that Robert Rusler understood the subtext of the movie, and he said, like, that's how I acted it. Like, he understands the subtext of the scene, which I think gives it that punch. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like I said, I fucking love Kim Myers. It's so much. Like, I stan her. I have stanned Kim Myers since I was, like, a fucking 12-year-old that watched this movie for the first time and didn't understand it. I love her. Like, I think she's iconic. But, like, he was the emotional punch of this movie. Like, honestly, I feel like maybe you guys can argue with me. I feel like the emotional linchpin of this movie was his character. Because he has that, like, kind of standard, I mean, it is a trope, especially in horror, to, like, have somebody move from, like, oh, they're the annoying kind of antagonist to they're actually, like, the person that the protagonist depends on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he became very quickly more than that and became, you know, obviously, as we say, the coded, like, boyfriend. And he really understood. And when you watch, like, when I rewatch this after watching, I mean, I've seen this a bajillion times over the years, even after I realized it was clearly, like, a queer horror movie. You know, and we'd watch it and, like, have a few drinks and kind of laugh at it and, like, go, this is, like, kind of brilliant. But when I watched the documentary and he, like, on numerous occasions said, I totally understood what this movie was, and that's how I acted it. And then when I rewatched it after that and was like, holy shit, like, he really gets it, because he was one of the only people in this movie that, like, nailed the kind of emotional gravitas. And that's why I think his kill scene is, like, probably one of the best in the whole Nightmare on Elm Street series. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
I probably wouldn't argue with you on that.
And I just think he's, like, actually a really good actor. Like, you know, I think he
does a great job on this. And I was gonna say too, and we'll talk about it more as we get into it. Like, I keep saying subtext, but I feel like once you reach a certain age, like, I don't think there's anything subtle.
It's not
about
subtext.
It.
It's text. Like, it's subtext if you're kind of, like, maybe younger and don't understand, but, like, I don't know. I feel like anybody that watches this after they're 15 years old probably realizes that it's text and not subtext.
I wonder if it really is an age thing. Yeah, of course, if you're, like, a little kid, you're not going to understand, but I wonder if it's, like, a generational thing. Do you think, like,
well, I mean, and
people
we're
growing
anyway,
up today?
Yeah,
like, do you think that kids growing up today are, like, young teenagers growing up today, like, get it because they're more exposed to that? It's, like, a lot more acceptable than when we were
absolutely. And, like,
growing up.
You know, now you have people who, like, you know, come out at, like, super early ages and are, like, you know, realize that, you know, like, they transition at early ages and stuff like that. So I feel like maybe it is a more generational thing.
Yeah,
like somebody who watched this at 12 now in 2020 would probably immediately understand, because they're already way more woke than we are. You know?
This is true. This is very true.
Like,
and media literate, too. Like, I mean, not only were we not as woke, obviously, but we were not, like, our media literacy, I think, was mostly self-taught. Like, we taught ourselves how to watch movies and how to read books, you know, because it's not really something that was, like, taught to us in school as such. Like, you kind of got a bit of it, but it wasn't, like, I feel like my just voracious devouring of movies and TV shows is the only reason that I have any kind of media literacy.
Yeah, because back when we were growing up, like, they didn't really talk about, like, digital media at school, really.
Oh yeah, it was like, let's dissect Shakespeare, and that's this is your literacy right here.
Also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, you might have gotten a bare butt when you watched Romeo and Juliet in class, and that's about it.
I also, like, anybody who anybody who listens to this podcast know that Rowan and I are from, like, a fairly rural place in Atlantic, Canada, which we live in again. And, like, I was almost 18. I was literally, like, 2 months away from being 18 years old when I met, like, the first openly LGBTQ person in my life. 18, like, that's super old. I think that wouldn't generally happen today.
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't happen. Before we get too deep into...
But when you look at it, it's like when you look at it statistically, you met people you just didn't know, right? Because it wasn't,
that's why I said openly.
Yeah, openly, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this is sort of the movie that kind of keeps giving, because I think every generation that discovers it takes something else from it. The generation that was sort of age when it came out took one thing from it. The generation in, like, the early 90s took something from it. Our generation took something from it. The ones after that, when you kind of, like, had a bit more, like, open discussion about, like, you know, like I said, kind of queer sexuality and stuff like that, takes it from it. Somebody that watches it in 2020 is going to take something completely different from it. But, like, you hate to say it, and everybody hates it, and it has, like, a horrifically low rating on, like, IMDb and stuff. But, like, this movie keeps giving. It keeps giving. There is so many fucking, like, layers to it that I feel like every generation has something to take from it, whether it's like positive or negative. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think, yeah, I agree, because I think because of like the content and because like as time goes on, we like become more socially progressive in that way, that yeah, like every generation does have a different perspective, just because every generation has a different perspective on queerness. Like, so
Yeah.
every generation would have a different perspective on the movie.
Before we get too deep into it, guys, I want to say my favorite scenes.
Oh my god.
Rowan didn't say his favorite scene yet.
It's okay, guys. It's okay.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Listen, but like you said, we have so much to say about this
So
movie.
much to say about
There's
it. I
so
agree
much
with
to say about
this.
this movie. I'm sorry.
Like I said, I agree with both of you. Those are all some of my favorite scenes. I also like everything with Mr. Walsh. Mr. Walsh, he kills it. Clue kills it in this movie. Is like,
he's really underrated. He is a solid fucking voice in this movie.
like, as the kind of comedy relief to it, but like plays it just deadpan straight. Like, he does such a good job. I just really like all the scenes with him, like with the whole family interaction. Like, I love the scene where the bird explodes and, you know, he's just like, oh, it must be a gas line.
And then he's like, you put cherry bombs in the bird. It's so funny though, because like you bring that up, because in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, you also had the parents played by a couple of like kind of old pros who
exactly.
were like really established like character actors, but they played it like it was so deadly. I mean, the first movie was so serious, but in this one, I feel like the parents are also played by old pros, but they're like kind of hamming it up a bit. And I kind of feel like it's funny that you point that out, because he really is like the comic relief of this movie. If there is such a thing as comic relief in Freddy's Revenge, it is Clue.
I also like how he nonchalantly moved his family into a home where people were like brutally murdered.
And didn't tell them. And then when he's confronted with it, he's like, he didn't even tell his wife. He's like, yeah, no, fuck this. And then he looks at her and is like, bitch, why did you think we got such a good fucking price on this?
Yeah. You should have known.
Girl, like, communicate with your wife, okay? Like, communicate with your fucking spouse. That's all I ask.
I have a follow-up question for that once Rowan's done telling us.
I'm done. That's it. That's it.
That's him? Anything with him?
Yep.
Would you guys ever live in a house where someone was murdered?
100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my god, you guys are crazy.
110%. I can't think of a better place to live than somewhere where someone was murdered.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
I like 100% wouldn't.
Whenever you're feeling lonely, you can be like, there is a fucking person here who's like chained to this location for the rest of their afterlife, and they just have to watch me sleep and watch TV and like shower and poop, so... Why not?
Until they might try to fuck with you, though.
I don't care.
That's what freaks me out.
They have to watch me masturbate, so who cares?
I guess, like, you know, like we said, there's so much to talk about this film. I think it's important to, like, point out, too, and we said it briefly earlier on, but, like, this is probably the most hated sequel of this franchise. It's not, like, reviewed very well. When it came out, it definitely wasn't, you know, a critical darling, kind of like the first one. And I just think it's very interesting that this is, like, a true example of, like, a cult film. Because it's just, over the years, like we said, like, as it's looked at with these different lenses, and now, I mean, you know, we were looking at, you know, when we looked at the Scream Queen documentary, and even, like, the special features just on the Blu-ray for it, they talk about that the film is like now looked at as like one of the top perfect examples of like queer film to look at and study in university, and like it's exactly what you want when you're like studying queer film. It's like this
and
subtext.
Weirdly, it's like, of course, because this is the 80s, it's like queer film made by mostly straight filmmakers, like
that claim they don't know.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like, I don't think anybody that wrote this movie could be heterosexual, but that's just me.
During the documentary, it was really weird because he, like, the guy, Carol Baskin, or whatever the fuck, Dave Maskin.
How dare you?
Yeah, that's his name.
Carol Baskin out of this.
He, like, tries to, like, eventually defend himself by saying, oh, he, like, meant it to be homophobic instead of homoerotic, and I'm just like,
yeah,
how is that, like, a good defense?
Yeah, I was gonna say, really, he outed himself by accident.
Yeah.
But also, I'm like, I feel like you did mean it to be homophobic, because I'm like, girl, there is no way a fucking straight person wrote this movie. I'm just throwing that out there. Roast me alive. I don't give a shit. There is no
That's probably
way
why he was
a fucking straight person wrote this movie.
That's obviously why he tried to, like, project.
And I get that, yes,
onto
like, Mark
Patton
Patton brought a lot of, like, kind of, like, queer energy to this movie. And he did.
But
because obviously he carries it.
They also hired him, so they knew, like, what his personality was like.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Now, I will say, in everything I've seen, like, Never Sleeps Again documentary, like, all this kind of stuff, the only person I do believe somewhat is Jack Shoulder.
That guy's an asshole.
And that's only because, A, he's an asshole, and he really does, like, he talks many times, and any documentary he talks about, like, he doesn't overly like horror movies. He doesn't care. I mean, he kind of talks about in the documentary Scream Queen and the bonus features, like, he basically talks about, like, they gave me this script, and I'm like, alright, cool. Like, this'll get my name out as a director.
Yeah, he was very much, like, kind of a director for hire, and was just sort of, like, looking at his watch and ticking down the minutes until he can move on to his next project.
You know, I think there's a lot of hate for directors like that, and to me, it's like...
Meanwhile, he may have been doing that. He was quite good at doing that, and it sucks to say that, but, like, he churned out a couple of pretty good movies, even though despite, you know, having a disdain for the genre.
Exactly. And I'm all for, like, get your money, girl.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Just do your job. Do your job.
I just like how Mark Patton clearly had, like, some, like, trauma around this movie, and he's like, don't you think it's time to just, like, get over it?
Well, let's not talk about the documentary yet.
Oh, are we separating them?
Yes, we are separating
Okay, we're not
them.
weaving them together.
Not weaving them.
I mean, we can weave a tale.
It's a good thing that you brought up Mark Patton, because I think if there's anything we should spend our energy and time, to me, when we talk about this as, like, queer cinema and iconic and all that, I think, like, one of the most important aspects of this film and the most interesting thing to talk about is the inverse effect that they used of casting Mark Patton as a final girl, knowing he was the final girl, and saying, no, we're gonna do it as this guy. Because I really thought about this today and yesterday. We did review another film that did the exact same thing, if you guys recall, which is Evil Dead.
Evil Dead. I knew you were gonna fucking say Evil Dead.
Evil Dead did this.
But they're two totally different, like...
Two totally different things.
Also, Evil Dead was, 3 or 4 years before this, so...
Yeah.
Wasn't Evil Dead in the 70s?
No.
Oh, 1981 or something.
Yeah. I was gonna say, so it was like... Evil Dead was before the sort of, like, horror, but specifically slasher formula had been firmly established. By the time Freddy's Revenge came around, it was... Like, you had so many fucking mainstream horror movies, you had so many fucking knockoff, independent, like, straight-to-fucking video shit, that it wasn't even funny. So, like, by the time Freddy's Revenge came around, the genre tropes were firmly in place. Like, girl, when Evil Dead came out, they were not in place. That was sort of like, it was still up in the air, it was kind of like, you know what I mean? But, like, when Freddy's Revenge came out, those tropes were there. They were set in fucking stone.
And I mean, like we talked about it with Evil Dead, like, even though they knew, like, oh, Ash is the final girl, all they really did was take a final girl role and make it, like, as masculine and, like, this, like, masculine comedy aspect as much as possible. Where, like, this is really the first time we see, like, a male playing, like, this written feminine role.
Well, they, like, I'm sorry that I'm bringing it back to other things we watched about this, but they did talk about how it's not just the fact that he was like the final, like there were more aspects to it. Like they talked about how the final girl is normally like starts off with like being weak and then gains like masculinity or like increases their masculinity to become strong, and then they survive and it's the end.
Oh yeah, it's very much like, but it's all goes back to Carol Clover's final girl theory, right? Which is that the final girl is the one female in the film that like kind of like appropriates the power of the phallus, right? So she appropriates that masculine, which is why she's usually virginal. She hasn't like given it up, which is why she's sort of masculinized. She doesn't like dress like slutty like some of the other girls do and shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think Ash from Evil Dead would fit in that box at all.
No, I was just saying that it was kind of like a predecessor in terms of
males
in the final girl.
Last.
Jesse was definitely like the completion of that, where I'm like, you know, Jesse looks proper. Jesse's not dressed like a slut.
Oh my god, don't slut shame Jesse.
A girl
whomever else.
He wears some real tight jeans. And
yes,
he wears some real white tighty whities.
I like how he's like wearing, was that him that wore the jock strap or whatever?
Oh yeah.
And then I was like, is that how people wear them? They don't wear underwear? Like, I have no idea about sports, so, and I'm not a guy, so I don't know.
I didn't play in sports you needed a jock strap, so I have no idea.
I was gonna say, I think all of our only experience with jock straps is non-sports. I think it's all like recreational jock straps.
Please go on, Mike. What's your experience here? Also, Jesse really rocking the Hawaiian print shirts, like, hard.
I will say,
I'm loving every minute of it.
If they put out a Jesse button-up shirt, like if Fright Rags did a Jesse collection of shirts, I would literally buy every fucking one of them. Every one of them. Because I think that his entire wardrobe in this, and not just him, everybody. Lisa's wardrobe is iconic. I'd buy some of Lisa's shirts, man. Like that shirt when she was in the cabana getting her fucking, like, motorboat shit on. Like, I'd buy a shirt, bitch. Like, you got some fucking... There's some fucking good fashion in this movie. I'm just saying.
Fun fact, me and Xylia I was looking up Jesse's outfit in the iconic dance scene, and there's actually a tribute to that in It Chapter 2, the newer film. Richie actually wears the same print shirt.
It Chapter 2, starring Rowan Fraser.
It's true, I am a star.
By the way, he may be a very humble star, but he is in that movie, so check out It Chapter 2, and you will see our humble usual host, Rowan, in all of his fucking magnificent widescreen glory.
This is very true. Now, I did want to talk a little bit more about the final girl stuff, and maybe, are we in agreement that Jesse voted most iconic Scream Queen Scream? Like, his scream is spectacular.
When you
I'm
watch
sorry, ladies,
documentaries about horror
like
movies, when you watch documentaries about horror movies, and, you know, they have the Scream Queens of yesteryear doing their screams now, and it's like, girl, you were okay. And I really truly think like probably 3 of the moments I remember most from this movie are his screams of hysteria. And it's so Freudian. It's this Freudian, like, fucking guttural scream of hysteria. It's this, like, recognition of this, like, fucking other that is literally trying to fucking push itself out of his subconscious and out of his body into the world. And it's this fucking guttural, like, repressive scream of hysteria that is just like, I don't know, man. Like, I really truly feel like Freddy was trying to fight out of his body, because I don't know how he did those screams, but I think truly, like, this is, if you're going Scream Queen 101, watch this movie. Watch this movie. This is how you fucking scream, bitches. This is how you scream. It takes a fucking gay man to know.
You go, Mark Patton.
But we love Mark Patton. We love him.
It's true. It's so true. And I do want to talk about, we don't always talk about positive. Like, I do want to talk about things that don't overly work with the film. If you do a lot of research in this film, everyone kind of knows, like, Wes Craven was not a big fan of this, just simply because they kind of threw the rules of Freddy out the window. They brought him into the real world, which was, never meant for Freddy to be able to do.
Oh yeah, that was really like a device at the very end of the first one to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and Wes, R.I.P. Wes Craven, but he many times said that he never wanted it to be a franchise, and he never envisioned it being a franchise. It was just kind of a one-and-done story. But yeah, I feel like he really did have the biggest point, because like I said, it is, whether it has to do with the queer themes, it still is like the worst reviewed and rated film of the series, and there is things that don't work in it. Like, I do agree that Freddy in the real world, like, isn't that scary. He's kinda like all the other slashers. Like, the dream stuff is really what makes him unique and makes it scary, because anything's possible.
Okay.
Where, like, when he's brought in the real world, it's like, I can slash people with these finger knives, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, like, 100% agree with you. Absolutely. And I feel like that's why maybe a lot of people, fans and critics alike, kind of panned it. And here's kind of my take on it. So, one thing that we will notice whenever, and you know what I mean? And I will say, there's a reason why you listed Robert Englund so far down in our list of, like, people in this movie. Because Freddy is really not the main character of this movie. Freddy is, like, literally in maybe, like, 20% of this movie. They talk about him a lot, but he's not actually present. Because, again, Freddy is more like an element of Jesse's subconscious. So, my kind of challenge is this. Have we noticed how in this entire movie, Freddy appears very... How do I put this without seeming... Okay, so, like, even physically, he's wet. Like, Freddy seems very wet and dewy every time we see him. And I know that it's partially because Nancy destroyed him at the end of part 1, so he's, like, being reborn, obviously, and he's trying to, like, kind of, like, recalculate himself and reintegrate himself into, like, the dream world and then reality. Again, I feel like the writer of this either is a genius or a moron. I can't tell which.
There's a fine line.
There's a very fine line, and I feel like this guy had his fucking 9 toes all over the goddamn place. So, I feel like Freddy is, like, literally, I feel like this is an aesthetic decision, and again, Jack Shoulder, God love him, he is actually, like, I feel, like I said, I've seen a few of his movies, and I think he's actually quite talented at, like, the kind of slasher horror genre, even if he doesn't want to be. But I feel like he was just activating his, like, his id. It was just this totally subconscious thing, and he was working with the script, and it was this Freudian... I feel like this whole fucking, like, Nightmare on Elm Street 1 to 3 is a Freudian nightmare. So, Freddy is this, like, dripping wet, kind of, like, sopping, dewy... He's being reborn. Yes, he's being reborn because Nancy, like, banished him and figured out his weakness. But he's also being reborn because it's, like, the dewy kind of, like, birth of Jesse's, like, queer sexuality, obviously. So, as Freddy's emerging, it's, when Jesse's kind of, like, at this kind of, like, crossroads hormonally and socially because he's moved and going to a new school, and there's this girl who's clearly into him who he's, frankly, clearly not into. And I feel like the fact that they, like, physically, everybody that worked on this movie, the fucking makeup on him, like, Freddy is dripping. He's so wet. Like, he's literally being born, and he's this, like, dewy new thing. He doesn't have his fucking glove anymore. The knives are coming out of his finger, and they're sharp, but they're weak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like this whole, like, aesthetic of Freddy being, like, a newborn baby. Freddy is this, like, like you said, it's like this fucking queer sexuality being born. Freddy's being born anew, except instead of, like, being this, like, murderous child molester, he's this fucking, like, 17-year-old's repressed desire. And I just think that is such a fucking brilliant aesthetic move. I think it's so brilliant. I, like, cannot correct. I feel like, how did everybody in this movie, because, like, the fucking makeup department and everything, how did they not get this? Like, you're doing this dewy, dripping, like, fucking gooey, moist Freddy? How do you not get that? How do you not understand why you're doing this? Like, if this wasn't a conscious decision, and everybody's just in denial, then it's the most sickening, mass hysterical, Freudian undertaking that has ever happened in any movie that has ever been filmed, because everybody that has been part of this movie, from the writing, the casting, the directing, the acting, the makeup, the special effects, everything, it's like, this is coded as Freddy coming out as this, like, newly queer entity, like, trying to come out in the world, but, like, everybody's pushing him down.
Yeah.
Jesse is pushing him down. Fucking, Lisa's pushing him down. The parents are pushing him down. Everybody's pushing him down. But he's this, like, dewy, like, he's just covered in, like, goo and fucking, like, sweat. And he's just trying to, like, emerge from he's trying to come out of the fucking boiler room furnace.
No, I agree with that. And I think, too, it's interesting because I think after this, that, as you talk about, like, Freddy being reborn and, like, it being part of Jesse's, like, queer identity, I think Freddy carries a lot of that in the other movies with him. Freddy is like very much more a personality as we continue on in the franchise, but Freddy's always kind of plain. I'm trying to think of a good comparison, and I think about, like, in the comic book world, the comparison of, like, Deadpool. Like, where Deadpool is, like, a bisexual character that, like, fluidly plays with, like, men and women and just kind of has this jokey aspect of, like, you don't know my sexuality, and it doesn't really matter. And to me, No, Freddy right. is that, where he can be sexual with men, he can be sexual with women, and we don't see that till after this film.
Well, Robert Englund says that he, like, intentionally did that, especially in that scene where they're, like, remember he's, like, caressing Jessica.
Oh yeah, and he was, like, wanted to put the knife in his mouth, and the makeup artist was like, don't let him put that finger in your mouth.
Yeah.
But it's so true. It's so true. It's actually, like, kind of frightening, because, like, I love that you brought that up, Ro, because, like, when you think about it, in the subsequent sequels, not all of them, but, like, especially the two following this, which, as I'm sure our listeners / the three of us will agree, I mean, Nightmare 3 and 4 were, like, two of the best sequels. Like, I feel like we love those sequels, but I feel like the power of Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors and Nightmare on Elm Street 4 The Dream Master is that Freddy really plays with, and I feel like this is a callback to part 2, even if the writers and directors didn't want to admit it, Freddy really plays with and toys with people's identities. Like, think of Dream Warriors. Dream Warriors is all about, like, my identity.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And Nightmare on Elm Street 4 is about identity in a very different way, in that Alice is this, like, kind of homely girl who has no personality of her own, and as her friends perish, she kind of, like, she absorbs their personalities, but, like, she's the girl who, she's like a mirror. She sort of, like, reflects and absorbs other people's strengths. Yeah. And I feel like in a way, 3 and 4 are also very queer, in that Freddy forces people to kind of, like, confront their identities, right?
Yeah.
And that their identities are very fluid and based on, like, people around them and, like, their desires and their hatred. And so I think that like, you are kind of astute in your observation. Like, I feel like you've kind of pointed out in a way that Freddy is, like, the ultimate queer icon.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I was thinking too, like, things, and I'm sure when we do get to the other ones, we'll talk about. But I think, like with Dream Warriors, I can't remember the character's name, but, like, the guy that's, like, doesn't talk. He's like mute.
Joey.
Yeah, Joey. And his whole scene where like he's like dreaming of like the like sexy
the
playboy
titty nurse, yeah.
Yeah, like the big titty nurse, but like when you really think about it, like that is Freddy having sex with him.
Oh, absolutely,
like she is Freddy.
Like Freddy's tongues come flying out of her mouth, right? Like she is just a vehicle for Freddy.
Yeah,
like the big titty nurse is a vehicle for the Freddy tongues to come flying out, and it's because Freddy like plays these roles, and he's like, I can be whatever you fucking want, baby. I can be your Freddy. I can be your fucking boy next door. I can be your big titty nurse. I'm whatever you want, and then I'm what I am, and you're gonna have to fucking deal with the consequences.
I feel like somewhere in here we have a tagline for the episode, like big titty nurse with Freddy's tongue flying out.
Big titty nurse with Freddy's tongue flying out, and Freddy scratching his fucking message into this boy's chest.
I think let's get to, is it scary? Because I know I definitely want to jump in and talk about the documentary after, because I think we'll touch on some more of this stuff. But let's answer the question, is it scary? Xylia.
I would say no.
I feel like it's always a no from Xylia.
I don't really find movies scary.
Okay, so from now on, anybody who's ever listening, Xylia's answer is always going to be no. So just fast forward past the next 2 minutes of any episode.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, hit the 15-second.
Yeah, just tap that 2 or 3 times, and you will just skip past Xylia's lukewarm explanation of why it's not scary.
It'll only be no, so you'll definitely miss some stuff after I say it.
No. We are Canadian, so it's English and French. No and no. No.
How about you, Mike?
I mean, okay, is it scary sort of like on the basis if you just divorced it from the socio-cultural context? It's actually still, it has its creepy moments. Like I said, my favorite scene, the Grady bedroom scene, I think that's actually, it's very viscerally done, and I think that does have really kind of scary elements to it. In general, not really, but also, again, then when you're sort of taking it, when you're looking at it in more of kind of a hindsight lens and looking at it from more of a academic / film studies perspective, it is kind of scary because you look at this and it was the mid 80s, and again, I don't want to get into the documentary too much, but when you think about that, this is kind of when AIDS and HIV is kind of hitting its crisis and really starting to claim a lot of lives that were very public, and it outed people that did not want to be outed as queer. It's horrific in that way because you kind of look at it as an artifact of the time, and it was this sort of subconscious manifestation of AIDS culture. And I know they probably don't want it to be that way, and especially when you look at Mark Patton and his personal life, but 1985, you have to look at it through that lens. If this is a queer movie in 1985 and you look at Freddy, he's not a killer, he's a virus. He has infected this person, and it's horrific in that. I think it's honestly a very scary movie, and that if you look at it as an AIDS HIV allegory, it's a terrifying movie. I mean, if you're looking at it, if you're just kind of looking at it in a general kind of naive way, and you're not looking at the subtext.
Yeah, stop being so naive.
I'm not reading X at all. I would never read X.
Yeah, okay.
If I'm looking at it as a straight up horror movie, it has its moments. There are a few moments that are actually really well done and kind of scary. It's not scary as a straight up horror movie, but if I'm looking at this as I now do, and I can't not view this movie ever this way, as a queer HIV allegory, in that lens, is absolutely frightening. Because because the end of the movie shows it's the only way out of this nightmare is for you to bust out, scrape off this fucking crusty burnt shell of Freddy and accept this girl who clearly knows that you're not into her as a love interest. You know what I mean? And it's kind of okay, so time to shed the societally inappropriate desires and get back to, the suburbs.
Your heteronormative
your suburban 2.5 kids. So I think in that regard, it's actually horrific. Argue with me, please, like anybody.
No, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I definitely, when I look at this question, look at it on a kind of layman term. So I said no, simply on the fact. I think, like, the first one was pretty effective in, like, being...
Oh, it's a straight-up horror movie. Yeah, the first movie was...
First one, Freddy's scary. I think the sequels, even though some of them are silly, play with concepts that can kind of freak you out or gross you out, that kind of stuff. This was probably the less scary horror movie, but like you said, there's lots of subtext there that is super scary if you really want to sit down and think about it. Are you guys comfortable in getting into the rating?
Oh my god, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll start with Xylia. Xylia, what would you rate it?
I'm actually gonna rate this one a yay.
All right.
Like I said at the beginning, this one and Dream Warriors are pretty much the only ones I remember besides the first. I mean, I think everybody remembers the first one. Yeah, I mean,
it's the Holy Trinity, the first three.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I like this one the best. It's different. I'm not like a crazy Nightmare on Elm Street fan like Rowan, like Mike. So I don't really care about it fitting into...
Can I just say, the fact that you said you're like more of a casual fan and that you just threw out this, I think, is my favorite. That shows that 30 years down the line, or 20 odd years down the line, the power that this has, and it's such an interesting movie, right?
Yeah, I look at more of like a standalone movie rather than how it fits within the series.
When I was rewatching this movie, I thought, and I don't know the details, obviously, of the writing of this movie, but I thought that if you kind of trimmed away about 15 minutes of this movie that had to do with Freddy, and just substituted, and you added in another probably 20 or 25 minutes to make it a little over, maybe approaching 2 hours. If you had added probably 10 or 15 pages to the screenplay, I feel like maybe it could have even been written as a standalone movie about a demon that possesses this queer teenage boy.
Yeah,
right?
I think so too.
And you could have trimmed all of the Nightmare on Elm Streetness away from it, which, frankly, like I said, Freddy's not even in it that much. and there's look at Nancy's diary and stuff, but that's literally about 7 or 8 minutes of this whole movie.
Yeah.
You could have rejigged about 15 pages of the screenplay and just made it a standalone movie, which I think underlines your point that it's a fine movie when you just view it as itself.
Yeah, exactly. Not in comparison
to the other ones. Yeah.
I'll go next. I'm gonna give this a slay. This is up there with my favorite horror movies of all time. I think when we did the introduction episode, this was in my top 5 of my top 10 favorite movies. I can't remember. Did we do top 5?
Your top 5 of your top 10.
It was in the...
So it was in your top 5?
Yeah, it was in my top 5 in that top 10 list.
Okay.
It's my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film. I love it. I love every ounce of subtext in it. I love Jess's dancing. I love that he's the scream queen. Mark Patton does an amazing job. He is my ultimate scream queen. So 100% slay. Mike, what do you give it?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked me, because I have many thoughts on this, including several of which are personal anecdotes involving all of us involved in this podcast. I will give it a slay. I have always loved it. Again, I watched it when I was very young and did not understand the subtext. And I kind of got the feeling, I kind of caught the vibe that most people did not like this as much as the other ones. And I understood why, because I was a huge Scream Queen fan, and I love Nancy, I love Heather Langenkamp. I love that all of the other movies kind of did a sequential story that followed the same characters, and if it killed some of the characters off, it picked up with the other characters. So, to me, this is Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is the Halloween 3 of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, which is to say, it's a break off from the narrative that you're used to, but it's also a really cool movie that stands on its own. You know what I mean? Yeah. And again, Halloween 3, if you trimmed away certain things from it, could be its own movie. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, if you trimmed away the Nancy elements, could be its own movie.
Yeah, 100%.
So my point is this. I also love it not only because, you know, when I was growing up, I watched it and I loved it despite everybody else hating it. But part of the reason why I love it is because it was one of the movies that we all watched together when we were becoming horror friends.
This is true.
We would have, you know, this is like irrelevant to anybody else, but we would all get together and have screening parties, and we would get very drunk and order horrific amounts of pizza and disgusting, like, Chinese food and all that, and smoke a lot of weed before it was legal in Canada. And we would watch our movies and just kind of like it was kind of like the prelude to this podcast. Like, we would sit around and scream at the TV and talk about for hours afterwards these movies. And so I like, one of my favorite memories ever is us watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2 in your apartment and ordering a huge pizza and getting horrifically drunk. And like, the point when...
It was definitely Greco.
Oh, it was Greco pizza.
Wasn't it Hobos?
No, it was Greco.
Oh,
it was a Greco
was
party
Greco.
pizza, yes.
And then it would always get put on my desk, and then my desk would be
your desk would be full. Your desk would be full of Greco party pizza grease for days afterwards. Anyway, and like, for example, we were sitting around on your what passed for a couch on those days. We won't go there, but we were sitting on your quote-unquote couch, watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and having a real good time, and just, again, riffing in the way that we are right now on, like, its kind of queer themes and, like, how much we loved it. And we'd be watching, say, the scene when they go to Don's place, which is the gay bar, and that, like, really cool song was playing. And like, literally, I'd be on my phone and we were talking about how that like sleazy song playing in the gay club was so cool. And like, I found it on iTunes and like bought it on iTunes literally while we were watching the movie. And when I got on the bus at like midnight to go home, I was like drunk out of my mind and like full of pizza and listening to the song on iTunes, because this was before Apple Music existed, because we're ancient. And you know, it'd just be like, we'd be like downloading the songs, and like the Bobby O song, Whisper to a Scream, when Lisa's having her party. You know, it's like, make up your fucking playlist. It's just, there's so many like good memories to this movie. It's such a personal thing to me. Like, I watched it by myself and had these like reactions to it, but then when we all became friends, and I feel like that's why Rowan loves this movie so much, is that when we all started watching movies together, like years before this podcast started, this was one of the ones that really cemented our like sitting around for hours and just talking about the like subtext and themes. It's to me that like the fact that it has these layers, even though like a lot of people just consider it this like IMDb 5.5 out of 10, you know, shitty slasher sequel. Like, no, it has these layers and it really brings people together, and it like starts these discussions. And like, to me, that's one of my like memories of us being friends and watching movies together. And I feel like a lot of other, and again, okay, I'm gonna like segue into the Scream Queen documentary. And it keeps showing these groups of like men and stuff saying like, I loved, like, this movie was such a like huge part growing up, and we watched it and we were like in love with Mark Patton and like blah blah blah, and we had crushes on X, Y, and Z. And I just feel like this movie has like this communal power to like bring people together that no other Nightmare on Elm Street movie does. It divides people, yes. I'm frankly going to say it divides boring straight people. Yes. But does it bring together a lot of like marginalized groups? Fuck yes. And I think that is the power of this movie, and it's a fucking slate.
Yas queen.
Mm-hmm. Scream queen. Scream queen.
So before we talk about the documentary, we need to do the budget game quickly. What do you think this cost to make? Xylia.
$8.3 million.
8.3 mil.
I'm gonna go $11 million.
Alright, Xylia's gonna take it.
Girl, you always take it. You always take it. You fucking budget
Not
queen.
always.
You fucking capitalist pig. I'm kidding. You are a capitalist queen. We love you.
Boo.
This costs $3 million to make.
Oh.
So
What?
very
What?
limited
What?
budget.
I thought they would have given them way more money.
The original one definitely had more than a $3 million budget. What?
I can't remember.
I know,
Well,
it's been
I'd
so
have
long
to-
since we did part 1. I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, I know. I'd have to.
Actually,
I'd
you
have
know
to
what?
go
Now that
back
I
and
think
look.
about it, part 1, I think the budget was less than $2 million. I think it was like $1.5 million.
Let's talk about what it made. What do you think it made, Mike?
Like $12 million.
12 mil. Xylia.
Like 7 million.
All right, Mike, you're gonna take this.
For once.
It made $30 million.
$30 million. Suck on it, Xylia.
We definitely have to
Suck
remember,
on it.
like,
Neither of us were that close.
Yeah,
they
but I
put
was
this-
closer than you, so.
They put this out, and this basically cemented it that they were gonna like make it a franchise because it made money.
Oh, well, I mean, the, like, profit margin was sick. It was sickening. Sickening profit
very,
margin.
very successful. Well, I shouldn't say very, very successful, but successful
Money.
enough to
Wise.
let them make other movies.
But, I mean, considering this was, a fairly new independent production company, the fact that they spent such a little amount on these movies and got such a return, like, obviously that's gonna...
I feel like that was like the biggest margin probably of any movie.
Oh,
that we
for sure,
reviewed.
yeah.
So I would say that's like successful in terms
That
of
is
money.
super successful, yeah.
And especially for like a slasher film, like you never expect to make crazy amount of money on them. If you make your money back, you're usually pretty happy. So this is a part of the podcast. I think this is an appropriate time. We did briefly, as we talked about the subtext and stuff, talk about the documentary. I just wanted to, kind of shout it out. So it's available on Shudder. You can buy it on like Apple and stuff as well. It's called Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. It's the documentary Mark Patton put together, basically about his experience filming this, because I don't think we overly touched it beforehand in this episode, but basically after this movie, Mark Patton disappeared for 30 years. After this movie came out, and we talked about like the AIDS epidemic, and this kind of outing him as a gay man, because he wasn't out when this movie was filmed and released, just kind of destroyed him, and he just kind of took off from Hollywood and didn't want to deal with it. So he made this documentary to, kind of, I think, deal with that baggage he carries from the documentary. And I'd love you guys maybe just talk about it, or like, did you like the documentary? Did you think it was...
I feel like his feelings were valid. He, like, obviously held a huge grudge against Carol Baskin. I can never remember the guy's name.
David Chaskin.
David Chaskin.
Carol Baskin. David Chaskin.
David Chaskin, the horror games Carol Baskin.
I just, like, obviously that was, like, a traumatic experience, and then the guy, like, pretty much gaslit him, and then, like, projected the queerness of the characters in the script onto, like, Mark Patton's
The actor instead of his script.
Exactly, and he, like, and then once it became, like, fashionable or trendy or whatever, he was like, oh yeah, like, I did mean it, blah blah blah. Like, I don't know, yeah, like, that's super shitty.
I know, and that was the thing. And like, I get how somebody watching it could sort of like look at it and go that Mark Patton was overly kind of like antagonistic and very defensive, and he was, obviously. But also, I feel like, yeah, they did gaslight him. And he did wait until it was a trendy thing to go, yeah, so you know what? I meant X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, but you know what? You kind of have to accept responsibility.
Yeah.
Over the years of when you are giving interviews and, like, making statements to go, like, you can't just kind of, like, deny it and put it on somebody else and then go, oh yeah, when in the 90s, when it was, like, really unfashionable to say it was a queer movie because AIDS was, like, literally killing everybody, like, I just don't want to admit that this is how I wrote the movie. And then, like, 15 years later, when it's in fashion to go, oh yeah, I totally meant all of that.
Yeah.
You know, like...
And
Yeah, Mark Patton moved away to Mexico, and you know what? I don't fucking blame him. I don't blame him.
Yeah, he, like, it was basically like...
And especially somebody like Mark Patton who was living with HIV.
Yeah.
Which is like a horrific, traumatizing thing to have to live with. Especially in, like, the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah, and, like... So the writer, when it was unpopular, he wouldn't take any responsibility for it. But then once people started talking about the film in a positive way and it became like a cult classic kind of thing, then he's like, oh yeah. And because the reason really it became a cult classic is because it's a queer horror film. So then he's like, oh yeah, like he's taking responsibility for it now, which is like horrific. And as Mike said, Mark Patton has AIDS. His partner died of it, and like
it's actually heartbreaking.
Outed.
Like that whole
like
if you watch that documentary, which everybody should, I literally wept. I could not believe, I had no idea this has happened to him, and like the baggage that he has, it's horrific.
Well, and that's the thing, and I think like there's a lot of trauma in his life that is related to like queerness. And to like that, and then also be like outed, you know, against your will, essentially, especially at that time.
Yeah, when AIDS was like kind of like still, you know, when they still called it, stigmatized. It was like the gay cancer.
Yeah, exactly. And then like he's dealing with this, like losing his partner. He has it. So he like for sure has like dealt with a lot of things in his life. On the other hand, there's something about him I don't like, and I don't know if it's like, I feel like he has delusions of grandeur, but he, like, there's a line where he's like, oh yeah, people tell me if they could meet me or Brad Pitt, they'd pick me. Like, yeah, I mean, that's probably true if you're like big into horror, like in this movie, but I feel like he like talks himself up a bit more than like as a superstar than he was, if that makes sense. He was really this was his role, and then after this role he basically like moved to Mexico. And I know he did other things prior, but this is definitely like a big thing. Yeah, this is what his whole career is based off of.
I think part of it is that and it's weird that they only spend like maybe a small portion of the movie delving into this. And I don't know a whole lot about this because I've never traveled for this, but like the kind of convention circuit is a huge, for especially horror people, is a huge, like that's where they make all their money. That's where they meet people. And I feel like that was kind of like the thing. This got him back into the like convention circuit and meeting people.
Yeah.
Like you make money that way, but you also like really connect with people that way. And like it showed him how many like fucking 24 photos or whatever did it show of him like snapping like photos with people, like doing the like pose and stuff, and like they were just like so happy to like snap a picture with him. You know what I mean? And I feel like the convention circuit embraces really minor celebrities and like people who would normally kind of like be working at a grocery store or whatever. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental like way because I'm a retail worker, but like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like it's sort of highlighted the like sort of importance of cult celebrity to the convention circuit and like fandom. Fandom loves cult celebrities.
Yeah, exactly. He's like very niche. I don't know.
Very niche. He's a very niche celebrity, yeah.
And I don't know if I would call that a superstar in a conventional way.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
not.
You don't see Brad Pitt like going to conventions kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he like makes it up the whole documentary as he was like this huge movie star and da-da-da-da-da. Like, I don't know. So that part I was just like...
But I mean, let's face it, they're making a documentary literally about him, so he is the Brad Pitt of that documentary. Let's face it, we might not agree about it, but there's somebody who took enough time out of their lives to like track him down to Mexico and go.
Wasn't it him that made the documentary?
Well, he made it like with people.
Oh.
No, but there were two directors to that movie.
Yeah. They basically approached him.
They approached him, exactly.
I mean, which makes sense because he's like a cult figure.
But I'm just saying, like, I don't think that he, like, to project onto him that, like, kind of like, I know it seems like there were some moments in that documentary where it did seem like you know, like you said, his delusions of grandeur and he's Brad Pitt and blah, blah, blah. But, like, he did not seek any of that out. Like, this bitch moved to fucking Mexico and married this man and, like, opened his own business. And it was not until they started, like, digging people out of the woodwork in the last 10 years to, like, do kind of, like, more obscure horror documentaries and stuff that, like, and, you know, I believe it. Like, I truly look at that and I go, like, he was sort of, like, a minor league celebrity in terms of, like, cult horror shit, right?
Well, when he talks about it in the past. Like, when he was young and he moved to LA, he was seeking out stardom. And that's when he, like, references being huge movie star is, like, when he talks about that time. Like, when he talks
when
about
he's
back
like,
then.
I was with Cher and Karen Black and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, like, this advice Cher gave me. And, like, he literally calls himself a big movie star, like, several times. And then, and then, like, things got too much for him and he was, like, harassed, which is shitty and super terrible. And then he went, like, low-key. And then I guess, I mean, after 30 years of doing introspective work, he, like, decided that he was gonna use his experience for something good.
I think even, like, as we're talking about it, like, because I said I watched it and I was like, oh, like, I could kind of see how he could rub off the wrong way in it, like, to some people. But I did think it was, like, the more I think about it, I think the duality of it's very interesting, where he very much so was on this trajectory of he was gonna be a big star, all this kind of thing. And then I almost, like, totally understand the attitude, even though he does great things now. Like, he seems very down to earth now with, like, the fundraising and the awareness stuff he does. But at the same time, just shooting the documentary, I can imagine, brings up so much stuff where literally not just an entire industry, but, like, an entire society, like, fucked this guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just, like, literally destroyed his life. And I can only imagine, because it's not like, you know, it was his life of being a manager of Walmart. Like, this guy was gonna be, like, a big TV or a movie star, or, like...
He was poised on the edge. He really was. Like,
yeah, it's like he knows he's on the cusp of this.
He very well could have, if he hadn't taken this role, been, like, a, like, big TV star or something. He could have been on Dallas for 10 years and, you know...
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but instead, because of such an intolerant society at the time, he's then forced, like, in Mexico. So then, as I looked at it, I just kind of, I guess I salute him on it, because I'm like, give your attitude, girl. Like, go ahead. Like, fuck everybody, because it's like, you royally got screwed. And I mean, especially, I think, we think about all the other, even not, you know, I'm not talking like Johnny Depp or any, but all the other, like, final girls that have been in Nightmare on Elm Street, like... This has, if they don't have fantastic careers, they were able to use this their entire career to their advantage at any period of time, where he wasn't able to use that. Like, this was a shame on him. He can now.
Yeah.
But everyone else, all the traditional Scream Queens in the 80s and 90s are using this.
But maybe his career would have died out if he hadn't have had that story behind him.
And that's one of the things, right? You never know, right?
I think he has a very healthy attitude towards the whole thing, especially after he talks to David, whatever the fuck his name is.
Carol
Baskin.
Yeah.
David
Baskin,
yeah. He has, like, a very healthy perspective, and when he was talking at the very end about how, oh, maybe I, you know, was meant to go to Mexico because I wouldn't be able to handle all these
and
things
don't get me
in the
wrong,
public
I
eye.
think that Carol Baskin was a piece of shit, and I do.
He had such a schmarmy look on his face.
While I agree that, like, Mark Patton was more defensive than he probably should have been, and, like, but again, it was editing. Like, they edited it so that it looked like literally his entire life was, like, pointing towards confronting David Chaskin.
Yeah. I said to Rowan, he is his Freddy.
I understand that's editing, but it's like, I also do feel like that this writer was I truly think he was a coward. And he was
100%
acceptable for him to do that. And I truly do think that he is kind of a piece of shit. And I feel like there's a reason
100%.
why he hasn't worked in 25 or 30 years.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And don't get me wrong, did you write one of my favorite fucking horror movies of all time? Yes. But did you fucking cop out? Yes. And did you work after that? No. So go fuck yourself, Carol Baskin.
Exactly. And I also wanted to bring up about the documentary. As much as he didn't care about any of this stuff, and he was the super straight guy, I do want to say that Jack Shoulder's scarf game was fabulous and on point. Yeah. The entire documentary, he was rocking those scarves heavy, while everyone else was in t-shirts. He was just wearing full-blown winter scarves, and I was living for it. I think I have nothing else I want to talk about I think we kind of covered the documentary a lot in the review of the movie. Yeah. And like we said, I think just go watch it and let us know what you think about it.
It's honestly worth a watch, whether you agree with it or not. It's a really good glimpse. I feel like a lot of it's not really something you see in the horror community. I feel like they're if you're really into kind of classic Hollywood cinema from the 60s onwards, and you're really heavily into it and the kind of gossipy angles of it, that you do kind of understand the Rock Hudson of it all, and the kind of the Hays Code and the coding of it all, and the fact that you couldn't be openly queer in any way, male or female. But, I feel like it's really worth watching the documentary, because even in the 80s, like I said, you're looking at this in terms of, okay, so, decades before, you were just looking at, you had to code all the, queer desire and stuff. But in the 80s, you really had to fucking hide it, because by the late 80s, you were looking at the height of HIV AIDS, and you could not be openly queer in any way, or trans, and it was just a fucking shit show to live in.
Well, if that is everything, we do have to get to shameless promotions, because just like Mark Patton, we got bills to pay, so we need you guys to listen to us for a second. Want to start off? If you enjoy what you hear and you don't necessarily want to financially support, you can support us by going to Apple, giving us a star review, and hopefully a text review so we can read it on the podcast. It helps us get seen. It moves us up when people look for horror podcasts. We become more seen in the searches.
Even if the text review is go fuck yourselves.
That's right. Go to Spotify, It Slays podcast horrific playlist.
We will be putting on the song from the Don's Place Gay Club, which is one of me and Rowan's favorite things that I bought on iTunes. The Reds, Terror in My Heart. We will be putting that on the playlist.
We will make Xylia put that on the playlist. Yeah, check it out. Give it a follow. We're always updating it. Make sure to follow us on all our social media. It Slays Podcast everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, wherever, we're there. And then our Patreon. If you do want to support the show, check out our Patreon, www.patreon.com/itslayspodcast. There's a bunch of tiers you can sign up for. You get cool things from shout-outs, thank you cards, the t-shirts. Lots of cool stuff on there. And before we say see you later, we will announce our next film we're reviewing. So we are back. We're done our Pride Month. This was our last episode. We do want to say thank you for your support with all our Pride episodes. This is one of our favorite times of the year because we love talking about and celebrating.
And also,
LGBTQ plus films.
If you don't support it, unfollow, block. We don't want you to listen to us anymore.
Get out.
Just throwing that out. If you don't support LGBTQ plus Pride, just literally unsubscribe, block.
Go
Good
to
riddance.
Mexico
We
for
don't
30
want you
years.
in our podcast yet.
So yeah, just thank you for tuning in. We can't wait to do it again next year. I'm excited to see what films we come up with to review. So the next film, it just kind of worked out. It's also my pick again, because we had these episodes picked out already before we picked our Pride ones. The next episode, we are reviewing our first musical, which is Repo the Genetic Rock Opera. So tune in and see what we have to talk about with Paris Hilton and all of her greatness, as Cecily Herber would say.
Oh my god, I love Cecily. I miss Cecily. Also, Sarah Brightman.
And I think that's everything for now. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye, it's Xylia.
See you. It's your humble host, Rowan.
It's a used gym sock mic.
See you later.